The morning rose slow and honey-colored over the edge of the Texas horizon, its light sliding gently across the dusty plain, as if afraid to wake the world too quickly. Marisol Boone stood in the yard beside her cabin, a faded cotton sheet clasped between her fingers, watching the sky brighten, while the crisp scent of sun-warmed sage drifted across the land. She always hung the laundry early, before the heat gathered its strength, before the stares of the townfolk could reach her across the miles. Early hours belonged to the quiet, and the quiet was the only place left where her heart didn't ache. The cabin behind her creaked with the soft memory of footsteps long gone. Her husband, Elias Boone, had died in the spring, taken by fever fast as wildfire. His absence had a weight no fabric could cover, a shadow that stretched across the walls and whispered through every unlit corner. She had learned to move around it, the way one learns to live with an old injury, never healed, only endured. At 22, she carried that loneliness with the grace of someone who had given up expecting the world to be gentle. Far beyond the homestead, the town of Willow Bend stirred awake, doors slamming, horses stamping, men complaining about the heat already rising. People would soon whisper as they always did. Poor girl. Widow so young. Land too big for her to manage. Some claimed she would remarry soon. Others muttered that trouble followed her since her husband's last days, since those vague rumors of unfinished business and disputed land papers. Everyone knew something was coming for her. They just didn't know what. As Marisol pinned the sheet to the line, the breeze shifted and tugged at her hair, twisting a loose curl across her cheek. She brushed it back absently, her mind drifting the way it often did during these early hours. She wondered how many more mornings she would stand on this soil that Elias had claimed with pride, promising it would become their family's future. She wondered who she was becoming now that the future had been pulled out from under her feet. A horse's hooves echoed faintly in the distance. Her body stiffened. Out here, visitors rarely meant comfort. Sheriff Alder Graves approached with the habitual swagger of a man convinced the world should bend at his whistle. His hat sat low, shadowing a pair of eyes that rarely softened for anyone, even less for her. He dismounted without greeting, dust rising around his boots, and she sensed before he spoke that whatever he carried was heavier than the badge on his chest. "Morning, Mrs. Boone," he said, his tone too formal to be friendly. "Hope you're up early enough to hear some news." She steadied her voice. "I'm always up early, Sheriff." He cleared his throat, looking past her toward the cabin, as though expecting Elias to walk out of it and settle the matter himself. But the dead remained dead, and Graves had never liked dealing with women alone. "Got confirmation from the land office," he muttered. "Your claim ain't holding. Those papers your husband signed, they leave more open than settled." Marisol's fingers tightened on the laundry line. "I've managed this place alone for months. Why come now?" He shrugged, feigning sympathy poorly. 3 days. That's what I can give you. After that, this land goes back under county review. Might all end clean, but you know how these things go. Could be contested. Could be seized for back taxes. I've paid everything. Not according to the newest records. She knew better than to argue. Men like Graves didn't bring decisions, they brought endings. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Between us, I'm trying to save you trouble. Folks talk. Some say your husband had dealings he shouldn't ve. Apache dealings. Owed them something. Maybe they'd come collecting if they knew he was gone." He glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting riders to appear from the brush. The accusation hit harder than his threat. Elias had traded with everyone, Mexican ranchers, traveling merchants, even a few Apache hunters when the river ran low. But nothing ever seemed dangerous, nothing ever hinted at a bond stronger than simple trade. "He trusted people," Marisol said softly. "That's not a crime. Out here it can be." He tipped his hat and rode off, leaving a trail of dust like a bruise in the morning light. Marisol watched him until the land swallowed him whole. 3 days. 3 days to decide whether she could fight, flee, or fold into whatever the county planned to make of her. She finished hanging the sheet, though her hands trembled. The wind caught the edge of the cloth and snapped it like a warning flag. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to reclaim the thin threads of control she still carried. She would not break, not where anyone could see. By noon, the sun rolled high and merciless. Marisol kept herself busy, sweeping the porch, patching a tear in one of Elias's old shirts, chopping vegetables for a stew she barely tasted. Town gossip drifted faintly from the road, voices passing by in wagons, horses clattering, laughter too sharp to be kind. She had long ago stopped listening to their words. It was their tone that stung. Only once did she glance toward the ridge rising behind her land, a line of stone and scrub where distant riders sometimes passed. Rumors had swirled lately. Apache scouts seen tracing old paths, moving quiet as shadows. Some were frightened, others indifferent. Marisol felt neither fear nor comfort at the idea. The land was theirs long before it was anyone else's. If they returned, who could blame them? The afternoon stretched like a weary sigh. She took refuge inside the cabin, letting her eyes drift over the familiar belongings she had arranged and rearranged since Elias died. The wooden box of his tools. The faded wedding quilt. The single photograph taken the month before fever stole him. Every object carried weight, and yet none felt heavy enough to anchor her to this place anymore. The sun dipped lower, casting long slanting beams across the floor. Marisol sat quietly, realizing that the sheriff's words had cracked something open inside her, a knowledge she had avoided admitting. She was living in a place that no longer wanted her. A place that waited for her to disappear so it could forget she ever belonged. Dusk approached, cool air drifting through the open window, the scent of earth rising with it. She stepped outside once more, needing the vastness of the land to steady her. The sky burned orange and soft as embers. Birds flew low across the field, rushing toward night. Somewhere in the distance a lone coyote called out, its cry hollow and familiar. Marisol closed her eyes. She pictured Elias, not as he died but as he once lived. Laughing. Holding her hand. Looking at her like she was not a burden but a gift. She whispered a promise to him, though her voice cracked around it. I'm trying to stay. That was when she heard it. The distant thunder of hooves rolling over the ridge like a storm readying itself. Her eyes opened slowly. Two riders emerged at the crest, silhouettes carved against the deepening sky. Massive. Bare-chested. Hair tied back in long braids that moved with the wind. They did not race or wander. They moved with purpose, with direction. Straight toward her land, straight toward her. Marisol's heartbeat stilled for a breath, then quickened in a sudden rush. They were Apache. And they were coming for her. The thunder of hooves rolled closer, each beat a slow, deliberate drum against the fading hush of dusk. Marisol stood at the edge of her yard, breath thin, fingers curled around the worn fabric of her skirt as if it alone could anchor her to the earth. The riders descended the ridge with the heavy grace of men who feared nothing the land could throw at them. When they finally reached the last stretch of dry grass, she saw them clearly. Towering, muscled, shirtless, sun-burnished skin gleaming like bronze caught in the dying light. Their black hair hung in long braids, the kind woven by hands that honored memory as much as strength. But it was their eyes that struck her first. Sharp, steady, devoid of the judgment she had grown used to bearing. These men hadn't come to stare. They had come with intent. The taller one dismounted fluidly, his boots settling in the dust with a quiet authority that made the air shift around him. He was broad-shouldered, near 32 by her guess, his expression stern yet thoughtful. The second rider, only a year younger but no less imposing, scanned the land with an alertness that felt ancient. They exchanged a look between themselves, no words, just a wordless understanding, and began walking toward her as if the distance between them had never existed. Marisol forced herself not to step back. Fear threaded through her chest, not wild but measured, the kind one feels upon realizing a moment long foretold has finally arrived. She swallowed hard, hoping her voice wouldn't betray her when she spoke. But the first man reached her before she could gather a single sentence. He stopped only a few feet away. His presence radiated calm control, like a mountain that didn't need to announce its size to be known. His voice was deep, low, carrying a resonance that felt older than the land itself. "Marisol Boone," he said, not asking but recognizing. She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" The second man stepped forward, his tone sharper, edged with impatience though not cruelty. "We know your husband. Elias Boone made a promise. We are here because of that promise. Pack your things and come with us." The world tilted for a beat. "My husband," she whispered. "Elias never spoke of." "He should have," the first man murmured, softer now. "I am Dakota. This is Nodin. We come for your safety." Her heart thudded. Elias had traded with Apache hunters, yes, but he had never spoken of vows or warnings, never hinted that his dealings carried weight beyond simple barter. And yet the men before her didn't speak like liars. They didn't look like men who came to steal or threaten. They looked like men fulfilling a duty carved into bone. "I don't understand," she said. "Why now?" Nodin's gaze flicked toward the distant road. "Because danger moves fast. Your sheriff means to force you from this land. Others may follow. Elias swore we would protect you if he could not. And now he cannot." Each word sank into her like a stone sinking into water, slow at first, then undeniably. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, to tell them she was nobody worth an oath from warriors who owed her nothing. But something in Dakota's eyes stopped her. His gaze held no pity, no condescension, only a deep steadiness that made her feel, for the first time since Elias died, that she wasn't invisible. Her voice trembled. "I can't ride off with strangers because of rumors and old promises." Dakota stepped closer, though still leaving respectful space. "We are not strangers to your husband. And we do not ask for trust. We offer safety. That is all." Safety. A word she hadn't tasted in months. A word that felt foreign on her tongue. Nodin's jaw tightened. "There is no time to debate. Sheriff Graves told the town you are being removed. That news spreads quick. Men take advantage of a woman alone." She flinched. The truth in that statement cut deeper than the warning itself. So many times she had felt the eyes of neighboring men lingering too long, the whispers of widows speaking of her fate as if it were entertainment. Elias's death had not just left her alone, it had painted a target on her back. She crossed her arms, gripping her elbows as if she might hold herself together by force. "I don't know where you plan to take me," she said, voice thin. "To our people," Dakota replied. "To the place your husband knew you would be safe." The mention of Elias again struck a hidden chord inside her. She hated how her breath caught, how a small part of her wanted to believe that Elias had cared enough to make such preparations. Another part of her felt betrayed that he had kept secrets. But above all, she felt the quiet urgency building in the air, the sense that something was closing in from the horizon, something she could not see yet, but could feel in the way the wind shifted. Behind them, the road stirred with faint noise, hoofbeats, distant but approaching. Marisol's pulse jumped. The riders weren't Apache. The rhythm was too unsteady, too many pauses. Drunk courage or angry purpose. Sheriff Graves' men, perhaps. Or Benjamin Croft, who had avoided her since her land trouble began, but watched her in town with a possessive hunger that made her stomach knot. Dakota turned his head slightly, listening. Then he met her gaze again. "You do not have to trust us," he said gently. "But you cannot stay." Nodin's patience snapped like a brittle twig. "Pack your things, Marisol Boone," he repeated, firmer this time. "Your life changes tonight." The certainty in his words pressed against her ribs. She hesitated only a breath longer before turning toward the cabin. Inside, her hands shook as she gathered the few items she could not bear to leave. Elias's photograph, a folded quilt, a small tin box of letters, a ribbon her mother had given her before she passed. She stuffed them into a canvas bag, feeling the strange sensation of her life narrowing into what she could carry. Outside, the last light bled across the land, painting Dakota and Nodin in molten hues. They stood guard, silent, watching the road with a tension that vibrated through the air. When she stepped out, Dakota nodded once. It wasn't approval. It was acknowledgement, a quiet promise that she wasn't walking into the unknown alone. Nodin swung onto his horse with a motion, so effortless it was almost fluid. Dakota held out a hand to help her mount behind him, but he waited until she met his gaze. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over his palm. She expected coldness, or impatience, or the impersonal distance she had grown accustomed to from men since Elias died. Instead, she felt warmth, steady and grounding, as if his touch carried a wordless assurance he didn't know how to voice. She swung onto the horse behind Nodin. Takota rode beside her, close enough that his presence formed a shield against the creeping fear in her chest. The road ahead stretched long and dark, the first stars trembling awake above them. As they rode away from the cabin, she felt a peculiar ache, part grief, part relief. Everything she had known lay behind her. Everything she feared lay before her. They reached the shadowed edge of the ridge when the sound came, a sharp, angry shout carried from the direction of town. Then another. Then the unmistakable thunder of multiple horses charging, faster, louder, closing the distance like a storm with claws. Takota looked back, eyes flaring with sudden clarity. "Ride," he murmured. Marisol's breath caught as she turned to see the silhouettes cresting the rise, weapons glinting in the newborn moonlight. They weren't coming to rescue her. They were coming to claim her. The night ride blurred into a fever of wind and hooves, the land sweeping past in shades of silver and ash under the restless moon. Marisol clung to the saddle as Nodin urged the horse faster, his voice rising in short commands that cut through the dark like flint. Behind them, the posse's shouts faded, swallowed by the wide, merciless desert. Only when the land dipped into a narrow valley, and the sky stilled into quiet, did Nodin begin to slow. Takota pulled up beside them, his breathing steady despite the hard ride, his eyes scanning the shadows with the instinct of someone who trusted the land more than he trusted people. Marisol felt her pulse start to settle, though the trembling in her hands refused to stop. She had left her home behind, but the terror of being hunted did not leave her. It clung to her like dust on her skin. They pushed on through the last hours before dawn, moving silently except for the occasional murmur exchanged between the brothers in their native tongue. Marisol listened, unable to understand the words but sensing their meaning in tone alone. Caution, alertness, the weight of responsibility neither took lightly. She wondered then about the bond between them, about the years etched into their shoulders, about the life they had lived before the moment their path collided with her own. Takota rode with a quiet steadiness, every movement deliberate, every glance protective but never possessive. Nodin, sharper by nature, kept checking the ridge lines as if daring anything to follow. By first light, they entered the Apache encampment tucked between two sandstone cliffs, a place alive with movement despite the early hour. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Children wove reeds into baskets near their mothers. Warriors repaired saddles or sharpened knives with a rhythmic patience that didn't need noise to prove strength. As Marisol dismounted, a strange stillness settled over her. She expected suspicion or hostility, but instead the people greeted the brothers with nods of respect and her with quiet, curious warmth. A woman with silver-threaded hair stepped forward, touching Marisol's arm lightly in welcome. The gentleness unsettled her more deeply than any danger could have, for it had been so long since anyone offered kindness without demand. Takota introduced her with few words, his voice low, his presence solid beside her. She sensed an ease in him here he did not carry on the open road, as if among his people he could finally exhale. The women guided Marisol toward a shaded shelter, offering water scented with wild mint, and though she tried to refuse, out of politeness or fear, she could not tell. Takota gave a small nod that eased her tension. She drank, letting the coolness settle her frantic thoughts. Throughout the morning, the brothers met with the council. Marisol watched from a distance, noting how Nodin spoke with fire in his gestures, while Takota remained composed, answering questions with the patience of someone who weighed every phrase. When the council dismissed them, Takota approached her, the edges of fatigue visible on his frame though he hid it well. He asked if she wished to rest, but she shook her head, unwilling to sleep while her world remained so uncertain. So he walked with her through the encampment, explaining in soft tones the basic rhythms of the place, the lines of respect, the rules rooted in courtesy rather than dominance. At one point, a young girl ran up to hand him a small carved figure, a bird with outstretched wings, and Takota accepted it with a faint smile that transformed his face into something unexpectedly gentle. Marisol felt her breath catch, not in attraction but in recognition. She had seen that expression once before, on Elias, during a year when the world still felt safe. It startled her, pulling something tender from her chest she had long hidden. She turned away quickly, pretending to admire the sandstone cliffs glowing amber in the afternoon sun. As days passed, a subtle rhythm formed. Women taught her small tasks, grinding herbs, weaving fiber into rope, tending to the drying racks of meat. These simple acts calmed her, giving her a sense of usefulness she had not felt in months. She saw Takoda often, for he seemed to appear at the edges of her days without intruding, always there when she needed guidance but never crowding her. Sometimes he brought her fresh water, sometimes a blanket against the cooling night, sometimes nothing at all but steady companionship. Noden remained more distant, though not unkind, watching her with a cautious respect that softened slightly over time. Yet the peace in the encampment did not erase her fear entirely. Sheriff Graves would not let her disappearance rest. She knew the kind of man he was, unyielding, petty, hungry for control. The thought gnawed at her especially one evening when Takoda returned with a cut on his arm, deep enough to bleed through the cloth he used to bind it. She reached out instinctively, fingers brushing his skin before she realized what she was doing. He flinched, not from her touch but from surprise, as if he had forgotten softness existed at all. "Let me help," she whispered, her voice cracking with the old ache of loss and the new ache of worry. He sat, letting her clean and wrap the wound with trembling care. In the quiet of the dying firelight, she felt the shift between them, the faint pull of something fragile but real, a thread forming not from desire but from understanding. When she finished, he thanked her in a tone so gentle it unsettled her more deeply than any threat could. It was the first time her hands had steadied rather than shaken since Elias died. That night she lay awake, listening to the distant hum of voices and the soft rustle of night creatures moving through the brush. She found herself thinking not only of danger but of Takoda's steadiness, his mute endurance, the way he kept watch long after others slept. It frightened her, not because he was a warrior, but because his quiet had begun to feel like a place she could rest inside. She wasn't ready for that. She wasn't sure she ever would be. The next morning, tension seeped into the air like a slow poison. Scouts returned from the east with grim expressions. Murmurs rippled through the camp, posse movements, riders near the canyon, men searching aggressively. Everyone felt the shift, the way birds sense a storm before clouds appear. Noden's jaw tightened as he spoke with the council. Takoda's gaze grew distant, thoughtful, weighted by decisions he had hoped to postpone. Marisol sensed the change instantly. The air had thickened. Silence wrapped itself around every conversation. As she helped grind herbs beside the older women, she heard footsteps approach behind her. Takoda crouched beside her, his voice low and steady, though shadows lingered in his eyes. "The sheriff's men are closer than we hoped," he said. "We must be ready." Her heart tightened, but she steadied her breath. Ready for what? He hesitated, and for the first time since she met him, she saw his composure falter. "For the truth about your husband," he said, the words falling heavy between them. "And for what he asked of us, beyond protection." She stared at him, the bowl slipping slightly from her fingers as the earth seemed to tilt beneath her. "What truth?" she breathed. Takoda met her gaze, and the sorrow in his eyes told her the answer would unravel everything she believed she knew. "The kind," he said softly, "that will change not only where you belong, but who you truly are." The truth settled over Marisol like a shifting shadow, its meaning slow to take shape. Takoda's eyes held a weight she had never seen before, a sorrow that felt carved from years of silence. She waited for him to continue, but he turned toward the rising murmur of voices moving through the encampment. The people gathered in tight circles, their faces drawn in worry as scouts exchanged hurried words. The air trembled with urgency. Marisol felt herself pulled into the current, not by force but by the instinctive understanding that whatever truth Takoda carried could not stand separate from the danger now closing in. She followed him toward the council fire, where Noden stood rigid, his jaw set, the morning light revealing the tension in every line of his body. He looked as though the world had tightened around him overnight. When his gaze flicked to Marisol, something softened, but only by a breath, before hardening again beneath duty's weight. Takoda spoke quietly with the council elders while Noden remained at the edge, as though guarding both the conversation and the woman at his side. Marisol tried to decipher the fragments of words drifting to her. Posse, ridge trail, armed riders, county men, but each piece fell like a stone in her stomach. The sheriff wasn't simply searching anymore. He was hunting, pushing closer, likely driven by pride, anger, and the need to reassert his authority. She could almost picture his face as he learned she'd fled with Apache warriors. He would not let that be the final word. Nodin turned to her, voice low but steady, as though bracing her for the tide about to rise. The men coming are not here for justice. They come to take what they believe belongs to them. They will not listen. They will not show mercy. His tone carried no exaggeration, no attempt to frighten her. It was truth spoken clean. She swallowed hard, feeling a hollow ache unfurl in her chest, an echo of the danger she had tried so hard to outrun. The council dismissed the brothers, and Dakota approached her with a careful step, as if measuring her readiness for the truth he had held back. His presence steadied her even before he spoke. "Your husband had more than trade with our people," he said quietly. "He had debt, honor debt. He swore that if danger came for him, we were to protect you, not only as a widow, but as one tied to our tribe through his word." Marisol blinked, the meaning threading through her like a slow realization. "But I'm not." He shook his head gently. "He gave you a place among us before his final days, though he did not tell you. He feared burdening you. But in doing so, he left the truth unfinished. That is what follows you now. The sheriff suspects it. The county fears it. Your land sits on a boundary they wish to control. And a woman with ties to our people stands in their way." Marisol felt the edges of her world tilt. She had never asked for connection, for belonging beyond marriage, and yet Elias had woven her into a story she didn't understand. The betrayal stung, though she could not decipher whether it came from the withholding or the sudden realization that her life had never been as simple as she believed. Dakota seemed to sense the storm rising inside her. "What you feel is your own. You owe no one forgiveness." But she did not need permission for her emotions. They flooded her quietly, uncontained. She looked away, blinking back the heat behind her eyes. She had mourned Elias for months, believing his love had been honest and complete. Now she wondered whether she had ever truly known the man she called her future. Nodin stepped closer, his voice more measured than Dakota's, though no less sincere. "What matters now is that these men use your grief as a weapon. They believe bringing you back makes them righteous. They see you as proof of their authority. They do not see you." His words cut deeper than any accusation. Between the brothers, Marisol felt a strange, grounding clarity. Their presence revealed how deeply she had been unseen by those who claimed to protect her. Her home, her land, her body, her decisions, they had all been shaped by men who wanted something, not men who offered understanding. The council reached its decision quickly. The encampment could not risk open conflict with the sheriff's men. Bloodshed would break a fragile peace, and the tribe had endured too many losses to gamble on pride. Marisol felt guilt coil through her, heavy and suffocating, as if her presence had become a flame threatening to burn a home not hers. She tried to speak, to insist she could leave alone, draw the danger away, but Dakota cut off the words gently. "You will not walk into danger to shield us. That is not your burden." Nodin nodded in agreement. "Our people will move further into the canyon. You will travel with Dakota. Quietly. Tonight." The words struck her like a physical blow. Leave again. Another uprooting. Another goodbye she didn't know how to voice. She didn't even know where Dakota planned to take her, though his tone suggested somewhere beyond reach, somewhere Sheriff Graves could not claim her like property. The idea of leaving the safety of the encampment frightened her, but the thought of staying and causing harm frightened her more. As the sun lowered, painting the sky with bruised colors, preparations began quietly. The women packed provisions, tying bundles of dried meat and herbs. Children watched with solemn curiosity. No one cried out or panicked. They moved with the practiced grace of those who had spent generations surviving displacement. Marisol felt her chest tighten as she realized she wasn't the only one being forced into motion by the sheriff's ruthlessness. Dakota approached her once more, offering a small satchel. "Food. Water. A blanket," he said softly. You will carry this. You choose what else to bring. She stared at the satchel before accepting it with trembling hands. His calm steadiness washed over her like a tide she could lean into but not cling to. She felt a strange comfort in the way he respected her autonomy, allowing her to prepare rather than taking over the task. Nodin kept watch near the edge of the encampment, his silhouette sharp against the dying light. Though his expression was stern, she sensed a deep loyalty beneath it, a loyalty not born of obligation, but of quiet belief that she deserved protection. As twilight thickened, Marisol moved slightly apart from the bustle, letting the murmuring camp fade into background sound. Her gaze drifted across the canyon walls, their surfaces glowing faintly under the first stars. Everything she had known, her husband's truths, her place in the world, the land she had tended, felt like shifting sand beneath her feet. She wrapped her arms around herself, seeking steady ground. She had expected sorrow. She had expected fear. She had not expected the faint, persistent thread of trust pulling her toward Dakota. It unnerved her. It unsettled her. It felt like the first fragile flicker of something she did not dare name. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to steady the storm inside her. The final preparations finished as night settled fully. Fires dimmed. Voices hushed. Dakota stepped toward her, silhouetted in moonlight, his presence as grounding as the earth beneath them. "It is time," he whispered. She nodded, though her pulse beat uneven in her throat. As she reached for the reins of the waiting horse, a sudden shout rang out from the ridge, sharp, urgent, cutting across the canyon like a blade. Everyone froze. Nodin spun toward the sound, hand gripping the knife at his belt. Marisol's breath caught as a lone scout emerged from the shadows, running toward the firelight with panic blazing in his eyes. He stopped just short of Dakota, chest heaving, voice breaking on the words that shattered the fragile quiet. "They're here," he gasped. "The sheriff's men found the canyon, and they're not alone." The canyon hushed as if the very stone held its breath, waiting for the first crack of violence to break the fragile line between safety and ruin. Dakota stepped forward, shoulders squared, listening to the echo of distant hooves spilling down the narrow pass like thunder forced through a funnel. Marisol felt her heartbeat climb into her throat, not from panic alone, but from the finality threading itself through the air, a certainty that something long building would break open before the night was done. Nodin approached them with sharp, deliberate steps, knife glinting at his side. "They're coming fast," he muttered. "Too many to fight without losing half the camp." Dakota's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm, steady as bedrock. "We move now. Take the western trail. Keep to the shadows." Marisol's hands trembled as she climbed onto the horse he guided toward her. She had fled before, but this time felt different, heavier, threaded with meaning she did not yet understand. As they started through the canyon's tight passage, voices erupted behind them. Shouts, commands, a rough cry of triumph as the sheriff's men spotted movement. Nodin barked orders, urging families deeper into the narrowing stone. Dakota stayed beside Marisol, guiding her horse through drops and twists she could barely see. The walls glowed faintly under moonlight, turning the world silver and sharp. A bullet ricocheted off the rock behind them, scattering dust across her shoulders. She flinched, gripping the reins tighter. "Stay close," Dakota murmured. His voice steadied her more than the command itself. They pressed on until the path opened into a small clearing, sheltered beneath a sloping rise of stone. Here, the sounds of pursuit softened but did not disappear. The sheriff's men were fanning out, determined to corner them. Nodin emerged from the shadows, breath ragged. "We cannot keep running like deer," he said. "They want her. They'll follow until they have her." Marisol felt the words strike something raw inside her. She dismounted slowly, refusing to let fear decide for her. "Then I should face them," she said, though her voice trembled. "If I leave, maybe they'll stop hunting all of—" "No," the word cut through the dark. Dakota's voice, usually gentle, carried a fierceness she had never heard. He stepped closer, eyes blazing with something unmistakable. "You will not surrender yourself to men who see you as property. You deserve more than their greed." His words stunned her. In them she heard not duty but devotion, a quiet truth blooming from the silence he lived in. Nodin stared at his brother, something like recognition softening his guarded expression. "Takoda," he murmured. "Say what you're holding." Takoda turned toward Marisol, the desert wind tugging at his hair, revealing the vulnerable steadiness beneath his exterior. "I wanted to protect you because of the oath," he said, voice low. "But that is no longer the truth. I stay at your side because my heart knows yours. I have tried to bury it, but I cannot." Marisol's breath broke, not from fear but from the overwhelming tenderness threading through his confession. No one had spoken to her with such raw, steady truth since before Elias fell ill. She stepped closer, drawn by a force she no longer wished to deny. "Takoda," she whispered. "I." A sudden snap of branches cut through the moment. Nodin spun, knife raised. Figures burst through the brush. 4 riders, weapons raised, faces twisted with triumph. "There she is," one shouted. "Take her, the rest don't matter." Takoda pulled Marisol behind him with a sharp, instinctive motion, placing himself between her and danger without hesitation. Nodin lunged, knocking one rider from his horse. Chaos erupted, dust rising in choking clouds. Marisol stumbled backward, heart pounding as a gun cracked through the night. Takoda jerked, not from pain but from fury, tackling the shooter with a roar that shook her bones. She barely had time to breathe before another hand reached for her. A rough voice spat, "You're coming with us!" But Marisol twisted free, adrenaline burning through her. She had run long enough. She grabbed a fallen branch and struck, surprising them both, the man for the hit, herself for the strength. He stumbled backward, giving Takoda the opening he needed. Within moments the riders retreated, scrambling toward the trees with curses fading into the dark. Silence fell, broken only by Marisol's ragged breaths. Takoda turned to her, chest heaving, eyes fierce with worry. "Are you harmed?" She shook her head, tears burning. "No. Because of you." He stepped closer, taking her hand, fingers trembling with unspoken emotion. "Not because of me," he whispered. "Because you are braver than any of them will ever understand." She met his gaze, feeling the full weight of what pulsed between them. "Then stay with me," she breathed. "Wherever we go, whatever comes." His expression softened, the fierce lines melting into something almost luminous. "I will," he said. "As long as you want me near." Nodin approached, wiping blood from his cheek, eyes weary but relieved. "The rest will come soon," he warned. "We need to move before dawn." Takoda helped Marisol mount, his hand lingering against hers just long enough to promise everything words could not. As they prepared to ride, a distant horn sounded, echoing through the trees, a call of gathering, of closing ranks, of danger swelling like a rising tide. Marisol looked toward the sound, fear threading with resolve. "Whatever waits," she whispered. "We face it together." Takoda nodded, eyes steady, voice quiet. "Together." They kicked into motion, riding into the dark just as the moon slid behind a cloud, leaving only the sound of pursuit, and the knowledge that the sheriff himself was finally close enough to smell the dust rising from their trail. And as the first faint glow of dawn crept over the horizon, Marisol felt the fragile, fierce beginning of a new life flicker to life inside her, stronger than fear, stronger than fate, stronger than anything behind her.